In this video, we're going to go through adding a roster to a stat network-based sport. In this case, we're looking at men's soccer here. And as you'll see noted here, when you first come into the season in game day after it's been set up, it kind of outlines your first couple of options here for handling the roster. And step number one is the way I would recommend going about it, which is for anyone that's used Presto in the past, all of your rosters and information are saved. And as part of that, you're able to age last year's roster into your new season. So what that allows you to do is bring over all your returning players, and then all you have to do is enter your new players. So on the page here, first step is import players, and then import last season. And you can hit continue, and then it will bring up a list of everybody on the roster from last year. Anyone that was a senior, it's going to uncheck them. But if for some reason they are coming back for a fifth year or whatever it might be, you can always check the box to bring them back for that senior season or for whatever year it might be if you need to adjust their class here as well. And in the same vein, if you have an athlete who isn't returning to the team but would have been an underclassman, you can come in and uncheck their boxes as well, and they won't carry over. And last at the bottom, it gives you the option to bring over their headshot and bios from the previous season. So if you want to put up a roster and to just to kind of hold space until you get all your headshots taken, you can always import last year's headshots to at least display those in the roster until you get everybody's headshots taken. So then once you've done that, you can click import here. It'll bring all of those players over, and then all you're left doing is adding your first year players on the team. So the best way to do that after you've imported returning players is add one player here, and then you'll go down the page and fill in player information. So the basic stuff up here at the top: number, name, year, and position. Stats information here in the middle. A lot of the stuff will populate. Whatever you put in here will carry down the page into the stat player number. Shared roster, just leave that as new player every time you're adding a new person to your roster. That is their position on the stat roster. And position abbreviation, as long as you pick a position from up here, will also, from the menu as it pre-fills, will also be pre-filled down here. But you can also pre-fill that yourself. And this is what shows on stat reports and stuff like that on the front end of your site. And the other item to note here is your stat category. You can toggle between field players and goalie for soccer. And that allows you to show which of their stats show primarily. So for football, it allows you to pick between offense, defense, I believe, and special teams, which means if you have a guy that plays both ways, but primarily plays as defense, but does have some receptions on offense maybe, but you want to display their defensive stats more, you can come in here and toggle their category. All the stats will still display, but this is whatever their primary individual stats that are going to highlight next to their photo in their bio. And career stats will also show here. Again, that's once you have a player already established. So new player here, there's really nothing to worry about in career stats. And then these three checkboxes are how you can control how a player shows throughout the website and on the shared rosters as well. So this hides the player from your website roster, but keeps them on the stat roster. Removing them from this takes them off of the stat roster as an active player, so nobody can assign them new stats, but they're still going to show in stat reports. And removing them from here hides them completely. So if you don't want a player to be showing in any stats or on your website roster, maybe they've left the team, I would recommend coming in and unchecking these boxes instead of deleting them entirely from the roster. Just in case they do decide to come back to the team at some point, at least you still have a record of all their information. You don't have to recreate the bio and reassign the stats. It's all going to be here. It's just going to be hidden. Then all you have to do is come back in here and check the boxes, and it'll bring everything back for you. But there may be an instance where you don't want to show somebody on the stat roster, but on the website roster, maybe they're hurt and they're going to be out for the season. No reason to show them on a stat roster if they're not going to have stats. But you can put them on your website roster. So those are boxes to just play around with and get comfortable as you're adding players. And the last field here is your bio field for each athlete, where you're free to create and add any bio information that you'd like. One thing you may notice is that we're missing some fields up here, like hometown, high school, height, things like that. You'll notice right here, edit settings in the roster tab to add more fields. So what we want to do is first, before you really add any athletes, is cancel out of here and go to that edit settings window here in the right corner to turn on those other optional fields like height, like high school and hometown. There's a lot here that would never really be used for much, but they're all here. And you can always add custom fields as well. So we'll add those. And now when we go back to add a player, you'll see that those fields are now available. So by setting those first thing, that field will be available as you go through and add each athlete. And they will populate all the information from any player you rolled over from the previous season. If this information was entered previously, it'll bring over that as well, even though the fields aren't showing initially. And that is the basics for adding a roster to your network sport.